Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alberto. I will be the chair of session 2. It is the time to start with session 2 of today's webinar on artificial intelligence. Our next distinguished guest is Professor James McLaughlin. He is head of the School of Engineering and director of the Nanotechnology and Integrated Bioengineering Center at NIBEC at Ulster University. Welcome, Professor McLaughlin, and go ahead, please.
Sure. Well, thank you very much indeed, Alberto. I suppose I've been given the pleasure, and thank you very much indeed for the invite, but I've been given the pleasure just of introducing this afternoon's session. So this is a relatively high level. I'll go in a wee bit deep in some places, but it's where I see the world of nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, and other solutions in there really helping with modern requirements for smart, robust diagnostics. And I think, probably I've popped into some of the sessions this morning. Sorry, I couldn't be at them all, but it was obviously, you could see where COVID-19 has moved things on. You can also see where technology has been excellent at moving. Technology platforms in particular have been excellent at moving the potential of even home-based diagnostics on quite dramatically. But the big thing is the sensitivity, specificity, all those operating parameters that we characterize day in, day out, and accuracy, etc., that comes out of that is starting to move on now at pace, and diagnostics are really of need, and some of the things I maybe point out today are some of the things that still remain quite critical, the type of things that we will work on and many of you work on yourselves. I'm not going to give you a history lesson on what we're about. I just want to give you some examples of where we've come from. The portable defibrillator was something that was invented here in Northern Ireland, and one of my colleagues set up a centre and invited this gentleman here, Christian Bernard, who was the first heart operation surgeon to perform open heart surgery and replace a heart. So we had a talk from Christian Barnard, whatever that was, maybe 30 years ago, and from then on we really haven't stopped with some of his inspiration and the inspiration from Professor Pantrich in developing a portable defibrillator, a defibrillator that goes into the home and automatically defib. So those are sort of key moments in our history. Now, what you do find is, what we do a lot is this end here, the tech transfer end, setting up companies and developing them, but also really concentrating around nanotechnology, cardiac sensors, tissue engineering, and some clean tech is the sort of areas that we specialize in. The success in companies has been very good. Stryker bought that defibrillator effort that we've been working on after Pantrich's work in the 60s. So Paragon's got a big strength now in portable defibrillators out of that work. Heartscape was a monitoring company, and Telesense is a wearables company using a lot of AI and machine learning type derivatives for looking at basic ECG arrhythmias. And then one big bit of a lot of diagnostics is what you do, and the therapeutic side, use of nanotechnology. It's nice enough for drug delivery. But at the same time, there's been lots of other patents and new hatcheries are coming through. So it's quite a buoyant area at the minute, and just bringing you up to date. So the work I've got involved with myself has been really trying to help out with various diagnostic platforms for COVID. There was a task force that's being created to look at rapid diagnostics made in the UK. And where there's a range of companies involved in it, the government looked at this consortium and they got involved to do not just the validation test, but some of the development within the antibody test itself. So that's undergoing a wide range of trials. Some of it's on sale for professional use currently, but trying to get that developed as a home use system where it's easy to effectively, you'll not make mistakes, and accuracy will be top of everybody's mind, and how we do that is critical. So that, combined with combinational apps associated with it, combined with track and trace apps associated with it, all becomes part of this offering that we get involved in. We talk about this. We have a hub And this is where we sort of merge these worlds of rapid prototyping through microfluidics right into artificial intelligence, and then take it out to develop what I would call robust real world. This is where the commercial interest then can come from, the real world diagnostic systems. But without clinical trial data, without large data sets to really trial out what you've developed, the algorithms that then tend to be used, or even the calibration curves, whatever, that tend to be used, and the operating characteristics that fall out of them, don't tend to be good unless you start to work up to those bigger validation studies and trials, etc. So that's really a lot of what we do. I just want to show this. This actually Northern Ireland and Scotland, the south of Ireland, we came together to create this doctoral training centre of sorts. It's called the Eastern Corridor for Medical Engineering. And as it happens, quite a lot of it is biosensing, but involving smart wearables, point-of-care diagnostics, particularly for heart failure and COPD, and with some smart homes, cardiac data analysis and cardiac rehabilitation, sort of bringing the cardiac theme mainly to work together. Been going for about 3 years, and I'm maybe going to highlight some of its work as I go through slides. My efforts sort of in trying to really bring, I suppose, artificial intelligence and machine learning about when I really started to look at wearables. Now, not so much biosensing diagnostics in those days, but my main work would be in diagnostics now. But effectively, we were picking up respiration, motion, arrhythmia detection, maybe 14 different arrhythmias, and based on a 3-lead system. And really, it came down to a very, very simple thing that with all our data sets, I was challenged with, it was with actually GE Healthcare at the time, to produce, ROC curves, sensitivity via 1-minute specificity curves, that were very high performance in the hospital theatre. And this eventually translated to this here, which was quite important: false positives per day, and really false positives per ward per day is what it eventually came down to. So I wasn't allowed any more than, say, 3 false positives per patient per ward per day. It was exactly what it came back down to. And with that, you have to translate that back to what a sensitivity and a specificity value might be for such a test. But, the commercial world, the GE world in this case here, and a lot of the hospitals were not going to respect anything that was outside of that operating characteristic. And then that took me back to, what did we do in our labs and in our companies? But, I mean, a lot of this sort of work here, and it's actually the same with diagnostics when I talk about that in a second. You start with some sort of simulator. You validate against a simulator. You maybe then take it and you do a lab test, and you set up some conditions that you put a protocol around, and those conditions you validate against. And then you start to work with maybe what are so-called gold standards or pseudo gold standards, whatever, and you bring those in, and you develop that because somebody else said that was a good gold standard, whatever, and you calibrate against that, and you think you're onto something, and then you take it out into the real world and find you're not even close to that. In fact, in the middle of it, you may be picking up data sets coming from other studies and find out somebody's only really making public some of their best data, and it's not the raw data that you're expecting. Now, in this ECG world, that's extremely important to get right, because we have so many different body types to put wearables onto, and we have so many different parameters that happen within a hospital, or so many different conditions happen within a hospital, that the false positives, false negatives parts could be really, really difficult. Anyway, that was 10 years of my life really trying to work that through in a company, by bringing in, maybe trying to improve a lot of that by bringing in other parameters like, fall detection monitors, so that if somebody basically had VF, ventricular fibrillation, and it had fallen, and you could stitch a few other parameters together, you could then be sure that that's not a false positive, that in many ways you could add to the value of the system. So that sort of combinational approach then became very important to get the number of false positives per patient per day down to a level of 1 or 2 that most the likes of FDA would be interested in. Right, I'm going to change topics here a few times. This is basically just a piece of work here just to show you, we do a lot on nanotechnology, producing nanoparticles for a whole range of different applications, including the biomedical one. We tend to use microplasmas for a lot of the work. This, again, basically is taking that microplasma work and sort of showing you the different areas we brought that into. We've droplet in a plasma where we're got little microplasmas, and we're looking at breath analysis, etc., and producing lots of nice multivariant analysis spectra for that sort of that work. Been ongoing for about 7 or 8 years, hasn't really found its way to full commercialization. It's still developing how we actually create a robust system for such work. This one here is a little bit closer. It's where we're taking a lot of our microfluidics capability and trying to apply it to both medical and deep ocean applications. So we built up a very extensive microfabrication facility for creating electrodes and pedometric electrodes, electrode systems, and integrating them into fluidic channels, as you see here. And these are just, again, some more examples of the sort of work that we're doing in that sort of microplasma system by building up and constructing array type systems. Even taking a wee bit further and looking more recently at pathogen work. We have a project ongoing using near-infrared spectroscopy to look at COVID as an example, but in trapping the material, getting it into a microplasma arrangement, getting electrodes around it, getting electrodes for plasma interrogation or just high voltage interrogation tends to be the type of things that we do quite a lot of. So all of this tends to be work. It's been very hard to develop into that commercial phase, but lots of little pieces that have been taken from this here and trying to take into more of the commercial phases. I just want to highlight, just before I join all this together, highlight that again, AI has been quite prevalent in what we do. Probably go back 10 or 15 years, it wouldn't be unusual to see us using neural nets to help with some of the data trends, be it imaging systems, or actually be it in raw data sets, to continuously teach the system and then see patterns within the system and then improve algorithms. It's usually about improving the accuracy of that algorithm using whatever we have available to us. The big thing that I would point out about some of the challenges in the medical world is that we've seen the aerospace industry using traditional equations and using conditional complex systems to solve probably what are quite complex aerospace issues to get an airplane controlled with an autonomous manner. Much more difficult in the biological world to get that right because of the huge variance that's presented to us and the very much the unknown that's presented. So that need for real time feedback is critical. Now, the platforms are starting to appear, the technology is appearing to really help with that. So using expert systems and closed loop systems to feed that sort of information back opens up some lovely challenges in fluid control, blood flow, heart failure, and areas such as that. Now, what I want to show you is just a couple of examples. We picked this one here, but we're working with Dundee University at the minute with this. Basically, blood in your eye, blood globules, we would phrase it. And if I was to play the video of this here, I would be able to see this train of blood actually moving along the various blood carrying vessels of the eye. Now, the velocity of that would be beautiful to measure with high accuracy, because you could maybe start to look at things like pulse wave velocity and therefore extrapolate out things like cardiovascular compliance or cardiovascular hardness, etc. So the type of things that we've been doing is looking at the eye here patterns and trying to see how much information we can get out of it. So we've been using machine learning and AI to extrapolate the data from that, just recently published some of the papers on it, and basically noting differences between, we would have taken a normal group and then a group that had suffered heart attack. So basically noticing differences in some of these key velocities, the actual velocity of the particles moving through the eye. Those that had heart attack, those that previously were in the normal group, and then those that were that eventually had a heart attack from data that we have obtained from earlier stages. So the objective here is looking at cardiovascular risk in the eye and using as much imaging and extrapolation techniques that we can get to actually accurately measure things like that, the velocity through different vessels and different vessel types, right through to eventually measuring pulse wave velocity, which means you would have to take a signal from when the heart actually kicks that acoustic wave into the artery and then see how it affects these globules as they actually move through the eye. So that project set's sort of moving quite well. This would be where we're combining some of the acoustic effects. So we're picking up acoustics in the heart to basically create that initial signal and then follow that through into, as I say, into the eye using a CMOS camera. Another project, again, just using some aspects of artificial intelligence is this area, which is very much the focus of a lot of attention at the minute, the lateral flow stream. The idea, if I can explain it in a nutshell, that you take a nitrocellulose coated paper, you load up a conjugation pad with a lot of nanoparticles of gold, you have them decorated the antibody, you run the antibody of choice along another zone where you have the antigen or antibody at that zone, and it combines, it leaves the gold particles in that zone, and then moves on to a drain further on up the slide. Right. To be honest with you, this is quite a nice looking sample. We look at the regions of interest, but that's normally a very blotchy looking red color. If we're ever going to use these lateral flow strips, and there has been lots of postulations to use them for some much higher accuracy home-based monitoring, we need some very good image capture of this area. So we've been doing things like this, looking at calibration curves and looking at how the likes of a neural net would actually be used to train the blotchy samples, try in some way equate that to the densification of the gold particles, and therefore help calibrate the device to much higher accuracy. So we've certainly found, upwards of about 10 to 12% improvements using different techniques within that area. I'm just hinting that these are areas we just recently published a bit in this here. The intention is to do a lot more work in this particular area at the minute. Okay, so I now want to race through just some of the bigger picture things that we're sort of doing. So we've always had this idea of, as many people have had, of integrating the sensor, the telemetry, and the blood collecting unit as one. So I just want to give you some idea of some of the tricks that we've been using in a heart failure project. So heart failure really needs three things. It needs your respiration and your heart rate. It needs BNP, and it needs cystatin C for your kidney biomarker. We started to bring these in together into a particular platform. The platform you can see here is capturing ECG and the different signals. We have a blood drop system coming into a detector. This is just the wearables vital signs patch here integrated together. Sorry, these slides seem to be running away on me here. They integrate it into a system, capturing those wirelessly. So you can imagine, in the case of a patient at home, they put the patch on, they take the blood. This is a little patented applicator that we've designed to be able to take the blood and integrate it into the lateral flow system. You can see here, this is the NT-proBNP, the way it's actually been captured. These are some of the images that we pick up when we actually look at it. And then this is the complete device then just assembled with analysis times of less than 10 minutes to create this user-friendly design. And then these are some of the early tests just showing the type of quality of calibration that you can get looking at NT-proBNP. Maybe move some of this work on then to, could you sample it using microneedles, sugar-based microneedles? Could that work? That works sort of deemed to be sort of quite simple. Wish I could just drop this a wee bit for a second. It's just a couple of these slides are automatically moving themselves on, which I didn't realize. So we just go back to the microneedle work here. You can see we've been able to shape different sizes from sugar, which is biocompatible in nature, creating channels in the sugar structures, etc. Allow it to pierce the skin, allow it to basically take the blood. Easy to produce, much harder than you would think. Seems to be a possible way forward, but these are the type of things that we do look at. In the data collection units that we set up for a lot of this work, just go back on this again, you can see basically here we gather lots of the data, we turn it into a traffic light system, we do the trend analysis, which is quite unique in this area of heart failure. Doctors don't normally see trend analysis that would come from a home as such. Remember, we're doing this work in a home, we're using a cardiac nurse to do it, and the data, when it gets sent back, allows for very careful consideration of changes in medication, and very importantly, stopping any readmission back into hospitals, which is some of the big challenges in this area. Now, I want to just talk for a few minutes just about then microfluidics and nano have played a role in the type of things that we do. Well, there's some obvious applications that we've looked at. I'm not saying they've been all hugely successful, but looking at carbon nanotubes and various nanostructured materials, because we can grow them. We've been trying these out quite extensively in the lab. We've been planarizing them and using them to create these sorts of structures and these types of filter arrangements. Some of these will very much grow on a certain substrate that won't suit what you're doing, so you have to create transfer processes to bring some of these structures over. Those hot embossing techniques that we will use to bring structures over onto other types of biosensing platforms. So these have been developed for that type of thing. We created these very singular type structures where you're using single multi-wall carbon nanotubes, for instance, to look at electrochemical performances or use it as electrodes to probe for whatever reason. So there's those type of structures that we've been creating in the lab, and then integrating them into microfluidics type channels. This would be an example then where some of those structures have been built in to various fluidic systems, and coatings such as diamond-like carbon, whatever, have been used in the past to change either speed up or slow down the fluidic nature of some of these devices. Changing the rate of flow in samples, or playing with some of the carbon-based materials that we put down by adding silicon would be a very typical example, or fluorine, etc., to really dramatically change the nature of that flow condition within the microfluidic device itself. So again, I maybe just a wee bit out of sync here, but that's the microneedle work again, just actually producing it out of what we're a big attempt to create the hollow needle. At the minute, there's been some success in that. If you could imagine the advantage of a hollow needle in microfluidics for piercing again the skin, would be that not only would you be piercing, but you'd be putting blood down through the hollow needle. Some success now. I mean, we've sort of moved it down this direction just as recently. We're getting a sort of triangle structure out through that route. So it's more sandwich type structure to get the blood pulled in as such. Right, integrating electrode arrays onto micro platforms has been of interest for us quite a while, in the sense of the electrochemical studies that we would be doing, or manipulation studies. So building these electrodes, modeling the fields that are required, tend to be quite a big part of our publication effort and the type of work that we would do at PhD, right down to single and triplet. And I've got a little bit of time, just watching my time here. At the end, I'll show you some examples of where we then trap single cells for very accurate measurement of a cell itself and rotate it to get even further accuracy involved in that. We do quite a bit in mixing as well. This would be some commercial companies here. We've been looking at all sorts of modeling techniques and how we might anisotropically mix or isotropically mix, and then eventually what the experimental results look like. So any of our work to date, you'll be seeing maybe 60 or 70% on a particular arrangement of an increase in efficiencies in just simply mixing reagents, mixing them in the correct way, right, without giving any large amounts of IP or anything away. But acoustics would be typically used to help with mixing. But it's not just straightforward acoustics. It's acoustics that you would apply from different ends in different ways and different methods, and introducing a few probes or horns into the system. And then ultrasonically or vibrationally acoustically streaming the material so that you dramatically increase any form of reactivity that you would be looking at, a fluorescence or an antibody antigen reaction that needs to occur quickly and rapidly in such a system. So mixing's been quite a successful part of it, and sort of working that through is absolutely key. So you just see some of the changes that you get with changing frequency there, a bit of work done on that, and then changing different angles and introducing the frequencies at different stages, etc., and different pulse widths have a big effect on actual mixing capacity. And really trying to control that uniformly throughout a sample, so that you just don't have one part working in a particular high quality manner. How do you actually control that throughout to get uniform mixing the whole way through? Wax patterning again has been used in some of our applications, and here we either print the wax or laser cut the wax channels. And again, important when we introduce it and incorporate it within microfluidics. We found that to be very, very useful for some low cost applications. Suspending it has been particularly good. Suspending the membrane itself above the void, so the moves to basically enhance the reaction. So that has a big effect on rates as they actually just throughout. We've published some of this work for this last couple of years, showing rate increases through suspended and non-suspended control from that fashion. So that's been useful. Another area then would be patterning paper, the likes of lateral flow, but this can be applied to other areas to enhance multiplexing, actually controlling very much the widths of these materials in such a way that you end up with enhanced uniformity, enhanced brightness, enhanced speed of reaction. Again, here basically in the case of TSH, and we're looking at intensity, just playing around with the actual geometries of that paper have a big effect on the detection, have kind of a big effect on the endpoint detections, and actually sensitivity, because of the way it improves brightness of the lateral flow device itself. There's ongoing work looking at taking the likes of polyamide and patterning polyamide, incorporate microfluidic channels, but then by changing the fluence of a laser, actually creating a graphene structure on the polyamide, just by converting the polyamide to a conductive graphene type material, and then integrating that into flexible sort of systems. It's just the biomarker work that we're doing. Just want to highlight a competition that we got involved with to try and bring all this together a few years ago. It was just 2 or 3 years ago, just bring the Qualcomm tricorder up here. The idea, and even the audience remember what the tricorder was, it was basically there to try and analyze very, very rapidly a whole range of diseases. These were the diseases we were challenged with trying to analyze. There's quite a few there. It was basically FDA supported, 360 teams within the 8 countries. And we ended up in the top 3 of this competition. We ended up 3rd, joint with another finalist. So the types of devices are quite similar to some that you were showing this morning there. We had to make 50 of these devices. That's one of the lateral flow systems that we had to develop, to manufacture these and get them pushed through, and eventually work up into a bag system, which actually we made another go at it. We changed into a box system so that you could quickly see what devices. So basically 90% of these devices, including the phone and the app and how it all came together, had to be developed by us, and you couldn't use any other supplier on the system. The UX part of this became hugely important. Color coding it and making sure that you knew how to quickly get at the different components was absolutely key. I just want to finish, I know I've only got another couple of minutes here, so just finish by showing you maybe a wee bit of more in-depth work that we do on trapping and manipulation of single cells, the use of dielectrophoresis, trajectory switching, trapping, and then simulations comparable to 2D and 3D microelectrodes. So as I mentioned, this cable exists to steer, as I'm sure has been talked about quite a bit this morning, into different outlets. So we're developing range of different systems, even to work within oceans or work within medical applications, separation systems, focusing systems, etc., to help channel some of the sensing systems. The end goal is to produce faster and higher sensitivity devices. Building and incorporating much better electrode systems in this time to create sort of very planarized types of trapping arrangements. These would just be some examples here of cells that we've managed, to trap single cells, and then the big piece then would be to see how we could control that once it's trapped from the point of view of rotation analysis. So actually rotating the cells here with about 20 or 30 volts supplied across the structure, and then also groups coming together and trying to rotate that again. So if you're actually taking measurements, for instance, of areas to get there, you get better statistical analysis from it. And results that we're getting to date when we're trying to, in some ways, normalize that or average out the effect of how a cell might position itself with these rotational systems, is starting to look quite promising. The single cell rotation in the microwell, this is the type of vertex flow that we would see, again, starting to look sort of, as if it has a function that's representing quite a reasonably well-controlled flow in the system. So consistent rotational flow tends to be the main parameter that you tend to look for in a lot of these measurements. So that brings me to conclusion. There's a lot of people, particularly with XPRIZE, that were part of it. I've run through something that's quite high level. What I really want you to realize maybe is that to produce today's sensors needs a multidisciplinary, quite a wide range multidisciplinary of tricks and skills that range from the nano and the nanoparticles I didn't talk about today too much, around, say, lateral flow, start to involve nanoshells and nanorods these days that are brilliant at improving sensitivity and specificity, right through to that whole transduction process of how you integrate into microfluidic systems the sensors, be it optical sensors or electrodes, right through to what you do with the data and how you present the data from a UX point of view, and how you then create the decision-making process using artificial intelligence or machine learning to really enhance that. Delivering what I maybe worried you with at the beginning is something that's got very high quality, high operating characteristics that are built on raw data sets and not sort of simulated data sets. That would be one big lesson that we've learned over many, many years, that actually getting the raw data from blood or the raw data from ECG patients of all types is absolutely key to building that very, very strong diagnostic system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor McLaughlin. It is time for question and answers. I will ask the audience if there are any questions. By the way, we have one question here by Sherry Matthew. I will read it. The question says, do we have real-time or near real-time sensors to detect infectious diseases from infected water, air, or surfaces? If so, how practical are these techs to be commercialized at scale?
Okay, well, it's actually a question I can make an answer at, and in fact, I took 2 slides out from my talk today, which I didn't think were, it was just to shorten it a little bit. I know it was a slightly long talk. So the slides I would have shown you were to do with work that I'm doing with a global group called SafeWater. And what we've been doing is applying colorimetric techniques to evaluate E. coli in water systems. Now, there's nothing new about that, okay? What we've been trying to do that might be new is create a very novel type systems approach to it. So effectively, not just using lens systems and all of the photonics capture of that whole process of illuminating the sample, mixing the sample, and actually doing time measurements. It's usually it takes about 24 hours to actually look at E. coli in water, but we would be looking at extrapolations of that early information and trying to extrapolate back to get a 2-hour answer, for instance, in early warning systems. That with some machine learning, but the most important bit, it's a wee bit similar to my last point there, is that we don't take water from just random areas, but we would take water from the specific areas that we would be measuring in, say, Mexico and Colombia and in India. And we would build and customize algorithms around data that we would get from those areas. So, for instance, the murky waters of some countries, that murkiness, if it's to do with mud or red muds or whatever, we would have found ways to extrapolate that out and customize the system for that particular area. We would find other areas that would have diseases that would fluoresce with less specificity, and therefore we would customize the algorithm specifically for that area. So the answer, I suppose, to the question is yes, these are real time, but from an accuracy point of view, it's probably going to take a couple of years to build up the data, the high quality data, to actually perfect these sensors to be really true decision making. We can certainly at the minute tell you that you've got E. coli sort of in your water system within about a 2-hour process. But the number of false positives, the number of false negatives in the area, and actually some false positives as well in the area, are just a bit too big for governments to really deploy. They're good for villages to deploy. That's been the sort of conclusion to date. And in many areas of the developing world, it is the village bit is the bit that we're all trying to focus on at the minute. So yeah, I mean, that's the best answer I can give you at the minute. There are some available, but there needs to be a lot more work done to get the specificity and I suppose even the sensitivity of some of that exactly right.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I will ask the audience if there is another question. If not, we thank you again, Professor McLaughlin, for such an engaging talk.
Thank you.
And now we will continue with our next talk. Following our agenda on artificial intelligence, I am pleased to introduce Dr. Fanny Terriggiani. Dr. Fanny Terriggiani is a lecturer in the School of Computing Science, where she plays a leading role in the area of digital healthcare at the University of Glasgow. Please welcome Dr. Terriggiani.
Hello, excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Great. So I guess I need to share my screen.
So, hi Fanny. If you go bottom right on your screen, there is an option. It has like an arrow and says share content. There you go. And
Okay.
now you choose share application screen.
I think I chose it already.
Okay, so now go to your presentation. There you go. Present mode.
Okay, so that works.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So my talk today is going to be I do here on AI with relation to wearable sensing and my vision on human augmentation models. So sensing devices has become very compact, wireless, and flexible. So these wearable devices, they are actually to sense several physiological. And I give you here an example where actually you see that, and those are located in this case very close to the frontal brain. So effectively, they're able to record electrophysiological data from. They are also able to record pH, which shows endocrine activity, cortisol, which relates to anxiety, as well as acceleration, which relates to human motion activity. And you see, for example, that this information can be used, for example, to evaluate the quality of sleep in this scenario. Another scenario here is with a sensor on the chest, which can measure ECG, so it can measure electrical current activity, as well as galvanic skin response. Effectively, galvanic skin response has to do with the impedance of the skin and is modulated by moisture. Therefore, if people sweat because they are stressed, the sensor should be able to pick this up. So the ability to have these wearable devices, which can continuously monitor human physiology and neurophysiology, opens many new applications. And the challenge here is how to develop artificial intelligence models that actually can do safe prediction and trustworthy prediction. So this, I showed you here work that Yola Jones, a PhD student at Glasgow University, has done with relation to actually classification of ECG. So ECG shows cardiac activity. It has a particular morphology, which you can see here. And the idea is to segment the time series into bits and to classify whether it's normal or they have some specific abnormality. So the point here is that we also interested to know how these classification results arise. And for this reason, we look into class interpretation. So we looked at which input values of the ECG signal result in the classification. And then we went through the values that contribute to a true classification compared to the values which actually are erroneous, are incorrect, and we wanted to contrast those two observations in order to allow to detect actually errors on the way, but also to allow the possibility to interpret the signal by understanding of where in the ECG morphology the algorithm makes their decision. What is also that they actually measure and they show brain activity. And even the cardiac activity can also is also regulated by the brain, and it also shows stress. So sensing devices has been used in very well controlled lab experiments, and I show you here an example. So here you see an EEG device. Here you see an integration of EEG, which shows picks up electrical activity from the brain, as well you see functional near-infrared spectroscopy sensors, which they emit light that penetrates the brain. And based on this, we can also extract functional information about brain activity. And at the bottom, you see a pair of wearable glasses, which they have incorporate an eye tracker. So we used this technology for many years to understand how brain works and effectively understand how decision making is made, as well as cognitive performance, how attention is modulated with cognitive work. But now with the wearable technology evolving into miniaturized technology and with the ability to record this data continuously, we realize that we can take into advantage the technology to actually improve performance in real-time scenarios. What I show you here is a surgical suturing task. Surgeons, they actually to undergo a lot of hours of training in order to acquire being able to control the tools in the operations, which are endoscopic, and therefore they don't have a direct view of the body. But instead they have to rely on video camera. And their situation and spatial awareness for this reason is so in this study in particular, we wanted to examine how surgeons are affected by stress. And for this reason, they had to perform the task within a limited amount of time, within 30 seconds, compared to actually performing the self-paced without restriction. So we used FNIRS, we used functional near-infrared spectroscopy, and you can see the setup of the optodes. Okay. And then you can also see the brain networks. So we use machine learning to extract brain networks. And we examine those across both expertise. So we examine those across junior and senior surgeons, but we also examined brain connectivity across different difficulty in the task, which is here self-paced and time pressure conditions. And we were interested to know differences between those brain networks, which and what we concluded was that senior surgeons we can view by looking into their neurophysiological data. Because effectively it modulates the way a human brain processes information. What we see here is that there is about and there is attention two ways that works. So it works attention competitive selection mechanism. We focus on particularly features of this image because they're interesting. And there is work, AI work now that perhaps more which are modular cognitive work it can provide hope with stress. Perhaps to understand all this, let's show you another example. Into a robot, a 70 it has the same degrees of freedom. It's actually used by astronauts to which they have, and effectively what the astronaut looks into is just 2D video views from cameras that are located on. So we want and we use physiological data. We use eye tracking and.
Oh, Dr. Fanny, sorry, apologies for that. Your sound is clipping a bit. Could you please turn off your camera to free the bandwidth? Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
And we see here a bit. We see the overlay of the eye tracking data, where someone looks while he performs, and we also see gaze. We see the EEG. And we also see the physiological data cohesion. So we had compared. And we also have latency, and we wanted to examine how whether we can detect differences in neurophysiological based on. And I showed you some here some limited results from there. There's far more on the publications, which is going to come. We look at the eye tracking data, and there's a number of indices which are related to blinks, fixations, saccades, the pupil characteristics as well, and we characteristics actually and try to identify whether or into EEG in different conditions again, and compared low all time pressure as well, time lag, and so on. So going back to the bigger picture, here we are going towards human artificial intelligence model, which actually is able to sense human neurophysiology, so is able to sense electrophysiological human motion analysis data, potentially eye tracking data, and mismatch representations between the human thing and what AI has thinks about the world, and in this way provide a closed loop, an interactive closed loop that would allow better interpretability of AI. Another point that another application I would like to show you here is about wearable technology and human motion analysis. Human motion analysis is powerful, and it has been shown to be sensitive to neurodegenerative diseases, and it has been used to detect the progression of neurological. It has the potential to use of mental, and also in an application such as elderly, as well as human-computer intelligence. And it seems to be modulated by cognitive workload. So I have started looking into GATE a few years, and one of the things I've done was to use different sensors to acquire synchronous GATE data. And I show you here that we use RGB display on the ear, effectively just an the ear is very close to of the human, is very sensitive to asymmetries in human, and to detect abnormalities. And at the bottom you see foot insoles, which actually they capture force of the ground exerted on the. In all of these cases, we are able to segment actually the time series into gate cycles, and based on that, this gave us a lot of power to in the machine learning to actually predict specific time events with relation to the gate, heel strike, and toe off, and also predict related abnormalities. Another interesting work we've done was with relation to detecting human pose with relation to the surrounding world. So for those that are not very familiar with computer vision applications, in computer vision, there are a lot of powerful techniques where actually they can produce and they can reconstruct 3D information, 3D world information from video by relating features, static features from one frame to the other. And there is also very to detect human pose and estimate human pose in real time. Here we wanted actually to unite those two approaches and being able to detect human motion with relation, accurate human motion with relation to the world, so, which is very useful if you actually have an assistive robot or a software. Another interesting work we did recently. It is about deep neural networks and human motion and how to use AI in this context to transfer knowledge from one modality, which is high resolution and more accurate, to actually wearable. So here you see in the middle the mock-up system, which gives us the ground truth. It's normally you have 8 cameras which accurately capture human motion, and with this system we were able to accurately transfer this knowledge to more noisy data derived from EMG data that measure muscle activity and RGBD cameras, well, single RGBD camera data. Another interesting application I was doing had to do with gait adaptation and again EEG data. So here we see we track someone that walks while he actually I guess you can't listen that, but I'm sorry. while he actually hears a music tone. So the music tone changes either from normal to slow or to faster mode, and each time he has to adapt his gait based on the music tone he listens. Here, what we want to create was able to when someone is about to adapt his gait, and also to whether he's going to adapt to a faster mode or to a slower, which is very important for exoskeletons. Last but not least, we shouldn't undermine the ethical challenges and the privacy concerns comes with this sensing technology. And it's important to realize that using this sensing technology at home will introduce new challenges and be able to actually in order to take advantage of wearable technology at that scale to find technological solutions that they will allow us to with relation to person's identity in a very early stage, and therefore protect both the patients as well as their social cycle. Yola, Sharon, Daniel, who are PhD students, us here at Glasgow University, and thanks a lot. Can you hear me or?
Thank you, Dr. Tergiani. First thing, we apologize for the technical difficulties experienced during your presentation. We ask our participants if there was something unclear, please let us know. So Dr. Fanny may kindly address again that for you. For now, let's move into the question and answers section. I'll ask the participant to pose their questions for Dr. Fanny, please.
Shall I stop sharing?
Yes, please. I have a quick question. Just curious, what is the biggest challenge in the field of human-machine collaboration at the moment? And how wearable sensors could contribute to overcoming this barrier?
Well, there are several challenges, and I think at the moment one of the challenges is how to create reliable application, and particularly use this technology in safety critical applications where actually we cannot afford to have a mistake. So we know AI is very powerful, and effectively it also fails in certain occasions, and understanding when it fails and perhaps limit that, that would be a very important step in order to use this technology. Can you hear me?
We lost connection? Oh, yeah, yes, sure. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you very much. Okay, it was a very interesting discussion with you, Dr. Tergiani. We appreciate a lot your participation.
Thanks a lot.
All right, we will continue with our next speaker is Mr. Shane Matthew. Mr. Matthew is the CEO and founder of AI Tech North, a UK-based business for supporting and boosting innovations in artificial intelligence. Please welcome Mr. Matthew.
Hi there. Thank you, Alberto. Can you hear me okay, Alberto?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so Alberto and Katie, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been a pleasure. Some really great, interesting talk from Professor Jim and Professor Fanny. It's nice to see what you guys are doing, and I would like to contribute my bit. Just before we start, I just want to sort of explain who we are and what we do just at a high level. So AI Tech North is a fairly new but largest AI community in the north of UK. We have partners across Scotland to Midlands, from Wales to all the way to Hull. And one of our mission statement is to democratize AI. So everything that you guys do, research and innovation, how we can really ensure that North and in general, any business and individuals who want to adopt this technology, how can they do it? So our mission is to democratize and bring the awareness with accountable and trustworthy adoption of advanced innovations. So that's what we do, and we absolutely are passionate about it. And to give you some background, who am I? So I got nearly 2 decades of background with data and AI, and my journey started 2 decades ago. That's me with a robot, inspired by nanotechnology, Sandia Labs, Robotech, and wireless technologies. So I used to be a communication engineer working on microcontrollers and building, stuff like that. So that's my graduate project, where I built a robot to detect intruders and use sensors like IR sensors to detect the presence and navigate through the room. And that kind of led to my journey to IT, data, cloud. And one of the biggest challenges that I found in my journey with working with large corporate brands and companies like Microsoft and IBM, I'm an ex-IBMer, and was the adoption. So I found technology was challenging, but it was easier to work with technology than to work with the culture and adoption. So all the hard work that we do, how we can ensure it actually adds value and brings benefit to the wider society. And that's one of the key drivers for me to be here today and represent a community. And hopefully I can give you some message that can help you and innovate going forward. So first and foremost, AI, obviously everyone knows I'm not going to give a lecture on AI, but we know AI has been here for nearly half a century, since 1956, when John McCarthy coined that term AI. And since then, we had a bit of a winter and a summer with AI innovation. We all know why, right? Supercomputers came in and they proved that machine learning is possible. It solved a particular problem. It worked with there's a great example of Deep Blue trying to beat the chess master Garry Kasparov in a chess game, and those sort of things really showed that AI is possible. But what was not possible at that time was, obviously, all of us couldn't have supercomputers at home or in our offices. So there was that winter. But I think in last decade, data proliferation, technology processing things at speed of thought, we have augmented information and analytics. Data that doesn't even exist are being generated these days. Communication, thanks to 5G and latest technologies, is so fast that connectivity has never been a problem. So all of this put together, and with the new trend of intelligence being the next fashion statement, everything is smart these days, right? From our cars to watch to any tech that we use is all smart, from TVs to anything, you name it. So intelligence is the new fashion. So we've slowly progressed into this new era of of intelligence revolution. And with that comes certain challenges. So let me just explain that a bit more. So we are shifting from, things that we have done previously, typical IT, to a world where IT is no longer IT. It's integrating with data science. It's integrating with business analytics and intelligence. And all of this is also integrating with the latest AI technologies. And the trend is pretty much like your CEO might come and say, a decade ago, a CEO might come and say, show me some data so that we can make some sense out of it. Today, people are saying, I don't want the data, I want information. And there's a new trend that's coming out of that, which is, if you imagine you have simple stats or management information from your annual sales or revenue that says you have sold a certain amount of product in June, say 3 million, and then you sold 5 million in July. I think that information is great, but I think the new trend is to understand what's happening in between these two bar charts, right? Between 3 and 5, what did I do that got me this number? So today, everyone's after that invisible insights, and that is intelligence. So we are using data and AI today and machine learning to really identify those patterns and key drivers that causes these positive impact and outcomes. So that is, I would say, the global trend as we speak today. And there are vendors and suppliers who are very much good at this, of nicely packaging this and offering this as a service. So, and almost every platform is at par with each other. So we have, for example, we got vision APIs. So all the machine learning models that experts have built is packaged and published and trained by experts. It's just published as an API to be consumed easily. So AI is becoming really accessible and kind of drifting towards the territory of low code or no code to a certain extent. So just consuming these APIs and embedding them into your existing application. And you got vision APIs that can detect objects and identify certain faces, and you could do a lot of things like sentiment analysis and a lot more. So really powerful stuff, and every platform is offering. So I think, how do we sort of distinguish and build something unique? Before we build something unique, I think there is an element of managing the AI expectations. So I inform most of us within our community that AI is not super intelligent. AI is something that is evolving still. And to give you an example, the car that you see right now is 1885 Mercedes-Benz first car. And that's pretty much our current state of AI. It's there. It hasn't got headlight. It hasn't got seatbelt. Look at the tires. Look at the road in the background. The infrastructure is not ready. And at that time, there was probably no speed regulations, or not even driving schools or driving license as a concept. So I think that's where we are today when it comes to AI. And if we gave this tool, AI tool, to everyone as a general masses, it can have its side effects. So I think the most important thing today is to really realize, how can we let these tools and innovation out there without any safety? Like, for example, it hasn't got airbag or it hasn't got seatbelt. How can we let these sort of innovations out in public without explaining or making people aware of what it could do? So first of all, what I tell everyone is we're not building real AI. We're building something really simple. Simple input into a model gives you simple output. And that concept is narrow AI. So really got to realize we're working with narrow AI, which has its own boundaries and limitations. Second thing is AI is not predictive. It is actually reacting to the training that you have provided, or the test data that you have provided, or the algorithms that you have designed, and is reacting to the design and the data and the inputs. So if you had a driverless car that has never been trained to identify a cow or an alien or alien cow or anything that we have never seen, you can't expect that AI model to sort of detect it and stop, right? So we need to be ready for those exceptions. And how do we sort of manage that? Last but not least is the purpose by which we build AI solutions. So research is great, experimentation is great, and I think that helps us push the boundary. But ultimately, it's the purpose of that particular research or technology to solve a problem. So we need to ensure that if there is a purpose, great, let's build a solution around it. It doesn't stop us from researching, but that final call, are we actually solving a problem? And that is really important. And yeah, it could be great that we have money and investment to build whatever we want, but I think we need to be quite assured of we are creating responsible and accountable solutions. Otherwise, we might create something like, you probably heard of those bad AI use cases or mistakes that big brands have done. The Twitter bot by Microsoft. We've probably seen in China there was this AI augmented reality newsreader, and AI sort of being used to sort of profile and find people who were crossing the road or jaywalking the road in China or Korea, I think, if I remember correctly. So yeah, we got to remember and understand what is the true purpose of the real design. Moving forward, it's important that we also acknowledge the barriers as well. So few top barriers that we obviously witness is technology. I think is the easy part. As I said, the culture is the most challenging aspect for any AI innovation. But alongside that, we see that data compliance, regulations, skills, lack of technology, and awareness of the technology. So having right people to build the right solution, executive support, which is all about leadership, and leadership bringing the right strategy as well. All of these contribute to AI innovation barriers. So how do we ensure all our effort of research and all the amazing stuff that we're doing translates into something valuable, is to actually tackle these barriers. And one of the key ones in there is the executive support, which is leadership. Leadership needs to be one of the most and core ingredients if we need to ensure we can deliver valuable AI solutions going forward. I think of the 7, this is the most important one, ethics. So ensuring that we are building responsible, accountable, and ethical AI solution, because I believe that if we are not ethical, we are building an AI animal in the simplest way. And again, my focus here is just to, at high level, give you, what are the barriers that you need to be aware of, what are the ingredients that you need from an implementation perspective, and ultimately, show you some best practices. These are some of the best practices that I picked up from a couple of my implementations, and mostly around chatbots. So you will see that, it says that we need to be aligned, we need to be responsible, we've got to be reliable, we've got to be fair in terms of how we design our solutions, and ultimately create something transparent and always have an element of human in the loop wherever possible. And also, let's remember that AI, artificial intelligence, in that 2 words, there's something powerful. It's an artificial intelligence, which means we have natural intelligence, and we got to use that natural intelligence first. Artificial intelligence should be augmenting us to sort of maximize our capability as human and people, not the other way around. AI is not here to minimize us, it's here to sort of augment us and maximize us as a human being. And that's the direction we should take. One of the core ingredients is executive thinking, and executive thinking could be quickly summarized by just one image over here. we all know what AI can do, but as from a business perspective, I think the world out there, some people struggle to even use Zoom these days, and this is a common problem. We think we know, but the maturity out there is pretty mixed and pretty diverse. So the audience who really understand AI is very, limited compared to the wider group. So I think we really have a big challenge in front of us in terms of bringing that maturity and awareness to the wider global audience. And how can we make this tech, successful for all? And that becomes a really key driver for us as a community. We live in a world where we often say we are data rich and information poor. I think that's an old statement. We live in a world where we are information rich and intelligence poor, more of it. So I think the way I define intelligence is the ability to apply all this information that we have positively. And if you're not applying all of this positively, we are actually innovating nothing. So I think I have a very simple framework which I often share with everyone, and it's product of AI Technology, which is how can we ensure this could be done in 7 simple steps. So let me share that with you. So first and foremost, I put this in a simple, organized fashion so that people could relate to it and understand it quite nicely. So first and foremost, start simple strategically with a problem. So S stands for start simple with a problem. And the problem statement could be, is there a problem to start with, right? Is there a use case for me? So how do you identify if there is a use case for you? You may have various resources, such as your data, your people, your organization, your operations, and all sorts of transactions that you do on a day-to-day basis. These are your resources. And I think at this point, just be curious about your resources at hand and see if there's anything that you could improve or if there is any need to improve. There could be definitely burning issues or use cases that you can address. So I think start strategically, tackle that problem in a strategic fashion, put a team together, put a strategy together, and start with the next step, which is innovate. So I stands for innovate. Innovation. When I say innovate, it's pretty much if you are working in a supply chain or if you're working in a industrial setup, you may have lots of sensors or you kind of tracking data from your sensors or oil or manufacturing process or anything. There is that opportunity for you to build a machine learning model for anomaly detection, for example, or predictive maintenance. And I think it's pretty much trying to see what problem are you trying to solve. And innovation could be just the way I mentioned, it could be machine learning for fraud, anomaly detection in case of fintech, going through a transaction to see if there's any fraud detection algorithm that you can place. If it's in a health tech setup, are you trying to see if images could be used to detect potential cancer or things like that? So it's really try to understand what technology you could use over here to innovate in the right way. To choose an innovation path and innovation technology and start with an approach. Now, when I say approach, for us as an experts, it's pretty easy for us to just pick up a code base or pick up a platform or pick up existing API and build it. Now, for others, it could be a challenging thing. For businesses who never heard of AI, for them, it's a big challenge. Now, approach is important. Approach means, are you taking top-down or bottom-up approach? Top-down approach means leaders are bringing experts and adopting new technology and they're investing. Okay, so that is top-down approach. Bottom-up approach is you already have the data, you already have IT skills, you already know that some of your developer and the team may have SQL or Python skills or programming skills. So you leverage what you have and you build up. Okay, so that's the approach you take. So that is all about innovation. Now comes the most important part of the framework, which is M for empathy. Empathy is understanding the purpose, the business requirement, understanding your stakeholder, and ultimately building an ethical and responsible solution. And this really binds and becomes the core part of the success of this project or your solution design. Because if people who will be using it, if they don't buy into this design or solution, I think you're creating something which is not useful for anyone. So it's really important there's element of empathy in there, which is being ethical and honoring the public and the user's feedback in this case. The next one, PL, stands for planning. So plan it through, plan what amount of technology, resources, people that you need, and the time frame that you need. And this is very important because AI is, I think we got to remember, it's not us who will be using it. For us, it's fine. We can quickly jump on the new tech and adopt and embrace that. Whereas for the users, it's disruptive. So how do we manage the disruption? This is where the business change management concept comes in. And every business needs to ensure that there is that element of business change management included in your planning. Okay? And that could be 6 months to a year. So what we don't want is if you're building a new tool with AI and there will be people and users who will be impacted by it, you're not getting a shock. Oh, tomorrow you're going to get this tool. Maybe inform them 6 months in advance if you think 6 months is the time frame. Yeah, so give that business change some bandwidth and some buffer time to sort of absorb this change. And planning is a key part of that. Bring everyone, all the ingredients, leadership, strategy, all in place, along with all the resources that you need. Next, E is confidently go out and experiment. E for experiment. Take the brave step, because AI is a complicated technology. The value chain of AI, right from the time of research, experimentation to implementation, it's complicated. So how do we ensure maximum success for any AI project is ensuring you constantly have that experimental attitude and mentality to sort of constantly work and refine and make it right for you. And that leads into the next step, which is constantly adapt. Be ready to adapt. It's a new tech, so you've got to adapt to the new framework, new regulations. Tomorrow Python may not be the right tool. It may come up with something else, right? So we need to be able to sort of see how we can ensure rebuilding something long term, constantly adapting and ensuring it also meets the initial requirement. So as you can see, the next step is improvise and improve. I stands for improvise and improve. To constantly adapt, constantly improve, close that loop. That's how we can achieve success. Because when you close that loop, you're constantly refining this journey, right? So, and you coming back to the initial point that, am I building the right product? Am I solving a problem? Am I actually innovating? So go back to the problem statement and revisit that. And I think by doing this and building this in an agile fashion, not in a waterfall, in an agile fashion, you can achieve the goal successfully. And I think that is, I think, from my side, one of the key recipes to achieve success with AI for most of the AI solution designs and solution implementations. The next one is one of the reasons we started AI Tech North as a community was we witnessed at first hand that when I was working in corporate world with larger consultancies, that technology was easy, the culture was challenging aspect. So how do we know what is the right thing to do? How do we know what are the best practices? By the time technology matures, it takes its own shape and becomes a bit fragmented. So we ensure that we can have we build a platform to ensure that there is that level of awareness to ensure that you are connecting with the other experts and partners or leaders to understand what is right thing to do, learning from their lessons, from their failures, so that you don't commit the same failure, and learn from it. A community is here put together to leverage the awareness and to accelerate everyone's journey to successful AI implementation. Speaking of which, there is an ecosystem. So tap into the ecosystem. So you guys have done a fantastic job to sort of bring everyone together from different universities. And sharing the knowledge. I think this is a wonderful example of how we build that ecosystem and awareness. Talking about awareness, you're actually creating a knowledge base. So I think these are some strategies in which we can democratize the awareness of AI. So that's what we do at AI Tech North, and we're absolutely seeing the fruits of the labor, really. Lastly, I think our message for everyone is to just be ready to adopt, embrace, and get started with advanced innovation. I know it's sometimes challenging to see what it looks like from the business side and from the user side. So I think we are here to sort of help you guys in any capacity or any shape or form. There are simple frameworks that we can sort of share with you going forward as well. So if you have any questions at this stage, please do get in touch with me. That's my email address. We also host a lot of knowledge sharing events and summits once a year, like a flagship event. So it will be great to see you guys too, if you wanted to get involved with us. Yeah. If there's any question, I'll welcome that too.
Thanks so much, Sharon. We have a few minutes for questions and answers. Yeah. So please, the audience, feel free to express your questions. Now I am becoming an AI fan, but first I will like to ask a question for you. What would be the most significant takeaway from your talk in terms of how a general audience like me should understand artificial intelligence?
So I think we got to understand the concept of intelligence first before we jump into artificial intelligence. And I think got 7 billion people out there, and I think there are very few who really understand what AI is and the impact of it. I think intelligence is one way to sort of use information from past or experience from past and use it positively. And we got to realize when you and I, or anyone who will be using AI going forward, we got to realize that there is that element of accountability and right to intelligence, which is something that AI Tech North is actively working on as well from an ethical framework perspective. Really understand that AI is here in its native format as we speak to augment us and not to replace us. And as a designer, as a researcher, or as a user, you got to remember that when this technology is designed, it's there to sort of help us in our own remit. It could be let's say lawyers. If lawyers are using AI to sort of scan through the documents, compress the information, or search through the archive, that's great. I think they got to realize that AI is there in a way to sort of augment, not to replace them in any capacity, so that they could focus on what they love to do. So by using some of these simple framework, there is that opportunity for people to see transparently that it's not robots, it's not all automation. It's something that we are designing from a people-centric and sustainability perspective. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, sure, definitely. Thank you very much for that. We have Another question from Jason Norman. I will try to read it as quite lengthy. Do you think it's possible to fully anticipate and prevent the problems that could be caused by AI? Are governments, AI companies taking it seriously enough? And it continues and it says, it makes me think of Facebook, a great technology, social media, which was widely adopted and has had unintended consequences years down the line, election interference, and now everyone's panicking and trying to sort it out in hindsight. Do you think it's inevitably something similar will happen with an AI company?
Very interesting question, Jason. And funny enough, AR Technology has a project called, well, I can't disclose that now. It will go public in January 2021. And it is all about addressing this problem. So one of the benefits of being a community leader like for AR Technology is I had the opportunity to speak to global AI policymakers, leading trust and AI lead advisors of big brands and global brands like EY, for example, or KPMG. And first question that I asked, is there a global framework? And the answer to that was no. The second question was to people like Office of AI. Office of AI is our strategic partner, so we work with them closely. We asked them, is there a global framework to address these sort of issues where, you know, AI is currently being created in any shape or form, and no one has the right to sort of control what the outcome of that solution could be. It's similar to, I would say AI's maturity is similar to a 4-year-old child's maturity, right? And what would happen if you give this child lots of watercolors, paper, scissors, and sketch pens, right? They could do anything. And, you know, I think we are in that particular state where companies have discovered that, oh yeah, AI is a tool, and what can we do with it? And this is why the framework, what we proposed was like the first step. Like, start strategically with a problem. If you don't have a problem, there's no need. If you're creating AI to solve a Rubik's cube, okay, great. What's the purpose it's serving, right? If you're creating AI to create a augmented reality news reader, right? What's the purpose it's serving, right? You are actually demonstrating that complicated, tricky, skillful jobs like reading a news could be easily replaced by AI. And I think that's not the message we want to give. So answering that question is, yes, government is really, they are working on it, but because of the complexity of creating something at global scale, it is a challenge for them. So what we have spoken to a few, and what we're trying to do here is take a different approach, because if everyone writes white paper, which is currently what's happening, everyone's writing ethical framework, white paper, and we got like 200, hundreds of white paper. Everyone's saying the same thing from different sectors or industry perspective and from region and country perspective. Pretty much saying the same thing, but how do we compress and bring this down and simplify this and make it accessible for all? So yeah, it is, if you don't control it now, we'll get to a point where Facebook has been, like, it will become inevitable that people build bad AI. The project that we're working on is to reverse this damage. So the project is in compliance with people like IEEE. We're also speaking to Office of AI with this. So once this project goes live, there is a framework which will, in a way, reverse the damage caused by bad AI practices, if that's one way to say it. So yeah, hope that answered it. But in simple terms, there isn't anything, but this is something that everyone is fully aware of. And because of the global situation of this problem, it's difficult to get like one silver bullet answer to it. But yeah, we're working on a different approach through the community angle, where people can democratize and vote for this particular principles or framework to be led forward.
Interesting. Okay, thanks, Sharing, for such illustrative talk and for your detailed answers. Finally, we will encourage or participants to attend your event, and they can get in touch with you if they need further information about that. Thank you very much, and many thanks to our speakers for their participation as well. We will continue with our CISMA webinar following the lunch break, so please stay tuned for the next sessions. We'll get back soon. Thank you very much.